So product is definitely something I stumbled into. I think I was in management consulting at McKinsey before this. And I realized at the end of 2 years there that I'd built a lot of core skills like critical thinking, number crunching, analytical thinking. But at that point, I knew I'd always wanted to be in the social impact space. And so I think it was this combination of using technology to build at scale, as well as having a really strong purpose towards which you're building, that I was looking for. And I didn't have an idea of my own at that point, right? But I knew these were two things that were really exciting. And I was so excited when I saw what Rocket Learning had just started building out. And the idea was really exciting to me. And so that's when I met with Aziz, and I was really excited by the product, by the idea, because it was so user-centric, and I just felt like it was something I wanted to get behind. I would say that the first year the intensity of experimentation was higher, for sure, because I think we were still trying to figure out what users like. So for example, another outcome of a rapid experiment was what method of digital engagement do users prefer. I think the ingoing hypothesis was purely video based, right? And the hypothesis was that if you have 2-minute videos, it's small enough for parents to watch and engage, but it's still, of course, a very high friction, high effort activity for this parent to take a video of their child and send it back. And so one of the other forms of experimentation with our core product offering was what type of learning engagement do we have on the group. And so we experimented with, for example, these digital annotation of images, which are, if you remember, we had these bingos, right, on social media, where you have like 9 things in a box and you use a digital pen to sort of tick things off. And that was one of our very early experiments of where we converted worksheets into sort of these digital annotation images. And we realized that engagement on those shot up by about 50%, because it's much easier to annotate a worksheet than do a video. And so we began supplementing the videos with annotation worksheets, and now we're building an ML model that can actually autocorrect these worksheets, because it's such a popular feature. Having about, I think we get about 5 million or 6 million responses just on these. In this sort of era of rapid experimentation, things that didn't work were, for example, non-personalized nudges for activation, for example, right? So we are dealing with low digital literacy populations, and they're not used to tech products in general. They're not used to having a virtual touch point. And so for the first touch point with them, so like getting them to send their first activity, we started sending out a lot of these nudges via WhatsApp notifications. And we just thought it has to work, but none of them. So we tried about 8 to 10 different types of nudges, and they were all non-personalized to some extent. And they didn't work at this point. We saw no lift. And so we realized that we had to, for different points in the user journey, we just had to adopt different methods of actually reaching our user. But the overall umbrella strategy was just rapid experimentation to arrive at these answers, because we had to figure out for the entire user journey across different archetypes what kind of nudges and what kind of elements of the product work and what don't. And as soon as we learned that they don't work, we had to discard them. And I think this was one of the, I think dealing with failure was one of the things that was harder to deal with, right? So when like 3 nudges don't work on activation, you're like, okay, let's try a 4th, let's try a 5th, till you kind of realize that this strategy isn't working at all. So I think also learning how to accept, I think it's easy to accept success. It's easy to accept a feature that's really worked and then, make that happen as a part of the product. But I think when you realize that something isn't working, one lesson we kind of learned early on is that if we understand why it isn't working, then we should now just pivot the strategy entirely. I think that as our audience evolves. I think that low-income families or underprivileged families are going to get more comfortable with smartphones. They're going to have more internet. They're going to have slightly bigger phones. Hopefully, there will be a second smartphone in the household for mothers to access. So I think as they become more comfortable with tech and with their phones, I think there's scope for our product to also become more and more, I would say, advanced in a way that we can bring learning personalization to kids. So I think the first step in that direction is actually having a web app or an application wherein we can actually personalize the individual child's journey, because right now it's group-based, and the group-based factor is super critical because peer motivation is we see peer motivation is a big reason for parents and kids to continue engaging in month 6 and month 9. And while that's really critical, what it also means is that we can't build a personalized journey for each parent on the group. So I think that moving in the direction of building onto the group element with a layer of one-on-one personalization for each child is going to be where the product evolves as their comfort with technology also evolves. I think definitely my most memorable moments of the last 2 years have been on field, because they've just consistently surprised me. I've never expected these. The conversations that have happened have always surprised me. So the first one would be when this was, let's say, 8-9 months into the product, after a lot of this experimentation, and we were in Chandigarh, and this 4-year-old child, she knew that I was related to the WhatsApp group where she's a 4-year-old kid, and she does these activities super often with her mom. And she sort of came up to me and she just asked me for where her chocolate was. She said, "Where's my chocolate?" And for a second, I had no idea what she was talking about. And then I realized that, so we created this leaderboard feature, which just shows a choco emoji next to a kid's name every day of the week that they're actually active, and it keeps getting added on. And this is one of the features amongst it, like wide suite of things. But that was a feature we launched 2-3 months ago. And so the mom then sort of chimed in and said that her child keeps track of all of the chocolates that are adding up against her name, and then she asks her mom for the learning activity every day. She says, "I want this chocolate against my name, so where's the activity for the day? Or I want this smiley, because we have a smiley report card as well. I want a smiley against my name, so let's do the activity for the day." And she's a 4-year-old child, and I think that sort of really astonished me. And she was paying attention to that so much that she sort of told her mom that she would add up the number of chocolates across weeks and tell her mom, and she would use these math skills that she'd learned, and she would tell her mom that, okay, now the last week was 3, this week is 4, so now you owe me like 7 chocolates. And it was really her mom, it was really endearing to see this conversation between the mom and the child revolving around doing more learning activities, having a little bit of fun together. And the mom also was really happy that she and her child had built that rapport. So I think that was my most favorite memory, particularly because I think it just shows how you can build systems of motivation that can scale so well. I think rather than having one person, per 15 or 20 people, which would take a lot of resources, a lot of time to actually reach the 35 million kids that are in this age group. Instead, if you can build these digital systems that, of course, don't replace people, but add on top of it. So you still have the worker on the group, but you also have these systems of motivation which are motivating kids and parents at scale. I think at that point we had reached about 600,000 parents. So you have this huge number of parents and kids actually being motivated by these simple digital features that appealed to them and that were exciting to them. So I think it was a powerful and memorable moment for me because I hadn't imagined that features would have achieved that talkability where someone's actually talking about it offline rather than just engaging with it on our products. That was definitely one. I think the second really memorable moment for me was when two mothers on field. They looked really shy, but they told us that they had taught themselves how to use WhatsApp because of our product, and they didn't have the permission to use the family phone before. So I would say in India, even if let's say 70% of households have a smartphone, only 20-25% have two smartphones at home. The rest have just one smartphone, which primarily stays with the dad. And there's a lot of stigma attached to women using the phone. And they use the word permission. They're not given the permission to use it. So it's bypassing them. But I think because we were doing something related to education on their phone, they were really excited to use it as an excuse to actually have access to this phone that they've never known how to use before. And they upskilled themselves. So I think we were pushing our users to stretch a little, but we were also meeting them halfway, wherein we're making something really simple that a semi-literate mother can also understand. It has two approaches that I think are critical. The first being the bottom-up product-led approach of actually building a learning product so specific to this audience that they're actually meeting them halfway and building a product that parents and kids not only need but also want. So they want it, they enjoy it, and they keep coming back to it. And I think it's really hard to force interventions down the throat of an audience. And I think this approach of actually building something that they love means that they'll want to continuously engage with it. And this product-led approach and the peer-to-peer model is actually creating this learning ecosystem for kids and parents that they've never had before in the early childhood space in India, parents and kids. And I think the second critical approach is the top-down systems-led approach. And I think what's so critical is that Rocket isn't building for these bottom-of-the-pyramid parents in a silo. It's actually building it through the system, and it's building it and it's simultaneously creating this top-down demand from the system as well to have early childhood education, to have parents being an equal stakeholder in early childhood education. And I think that's what makes Rocket very unique, because just having a product-led approach, I think, wouldn't be able to solve learning disparities in India. I think systems have a critical role to play. I think Rocket's bottom-up philosophy is that with an X amount of resources, what's the maximum impact we can create? So, okay, you don't have the money for Lego blocks, let's use household objects to learn cognition. Right, that's the bottom-up product-led approach, which is that we are not going to wait for budgets to increase. Let's use what we already have in every single Indian household to create learning activity and learning impact. The second top-down approach, I think, also enables in the long run a shift in the resources that are available to solve this problem. Right, because, and I think one really important example of that is that the government just recently announced Poshan Bhi Padhai Bhi, and I think that was a moment that was really critical because they've announced a 5x learning materials budget increase, right? And so when you go to the Anganwadis, the product-led approach has been, okay, you have these XYZ materials, how can you teach the kids with this? Now with this top-down systems-led approach, we're actually seeing that the actual number of learning materials and learning objects that are in the Anganwadi, which is at the bare minimum right now, can actually increase with this budget increase to about $100 million. And so therefore, I think having these two approaches makes sure that the entire ecosystem is moving in the right direction, not just one part of it. I think I wasn't too decided on my MBA beforehand, and I think it was the first time that there was this validation that you can actually build something that's so carefully curated for this user, while at the same time having immense speed and, you know, growing to, let's say, 1.6 million kids in just 2.5 years. So I think when I saw the potential for technology to actually be created in such a meaningful way with speed to create this kind of impact, I was really convinced that I think going to Stanford in particular for my MBA would be exciting because Stanford is sort of the mecca for tech, and I really and they do believe in building tech for meaningful purposes, and they obviously have cutting edge labs and professors in class. I think Rocket for me was about three things. I touched upon two. One was what the product and one was the purpose. So what is this idea? The idea really appealed to me, right? And the purpose, of course, I thought it was so critical that we were addressing early childhood education rather than continuing just to address grades 1, 2, 3 education. So the purpose and the product appealed to me. I think the third really critical part was the people that influenced my decision. And I think that there were two things about the people. I think the first is that they had this incredible balance between wanting to build something meaningful and wanting to execute rapidly. So they had this sense of urgency as well as having we don't have time to waste to actually solve this problem. But at the same time, we're not going to do a hodgepodge job of doing this. We're actually going to invest in the pedagogy. We're going to make activity, and we're going to make the activities and learning play-based. We're not just going to send digital worksheets every day and that's it, right? So there was this sense of urgency, but at the same time, this sense of building out quality learning. And I thought for the first time, I saw a set of leaders who were tackling both, which was very exciting, I think, for me personally. I think the second thing is that the way the organization has been built is extremely inclusive. And I think the single most important thing that I realized there is that the founders and the leaders set the tone for the culture in such a small organization in particular, and they walk the talk on inclusion, right? You can't just talk about inclusion. You have to take hard decisions when something is going wrong or when something is going against the fundamental values that the organization stands for. And I think that while focusing on high speed of impact and high urgency, they're okay to take hard calls that allow for this environment to be so inclusive. And so I think that the people of this organization and the leaders and how they've set it up in this very thoughtful, nuanced manner is definitely one of the things about Rocket that will stay with me. I think my one message to RL is just that I'm excited. I'm excited for everything that's being built there currently. I'm excited for when we do actually reach 10 million kids in India. That's going to be a huge milestone, particularly because I think there's a set of people that's aiming to get there in such a short period of time with such high quality. And so I would just say I'm excited for everything that RL is going to do in the next 5 to 10 years.